What would you do if the one you lost came back? For Axel, that question wasn't hypothetical. It was happening right now, in the middle of a Montana blizzard, miles from anyone who could tell him he wasn't losing his mind. 3 years ago, in Kabul, he lost his partner Shadow. After the explosion, the dog lay in the dust, eyes closed, taking his last breath. No pulse, no breath. The field medic shook his head. He's gone. Since that day, Axel had carried that weight every single day. He saw Shadow in his dreams. He flinched at every dog's bark. He spent every silent night drowning in guilt and regret. But tonight, through the screaming wind and swirling snow, he heard a sound that shattered everything he thought he knew. A howl, deep, familiar, impossible. Shadow's howl, and it was coming from right outside his door. Where are you watching this story from? At home, on the road, or maybe at work? Drop it in the comments. We'd love to know. And if stories of loyalty like this move you, don't forget to leave a like. Now get ready, because what happens to Axel tonight will change his life forever. Axel had been living alone in his isolated Montana cabin for 3 years. The nearest town was 40 miles away. The nearest neighbor, 15. That's how he wanted it. Away from people, away from questions, away from those who said, "How are you?" but never really listened. He'd tried city life, moved back to Virginia, stayed with family, went to therapy through Veterans Affairs. Everyone told him the same thing. Time heals. You need to move on. He was just a dog. But Shadow wasn't just a dog. He'd been through 3 operations with Axel, woke up next to him every morning for 5 years. Detected IEDs, sensed enemy movement, watched Axel's back when no one else could, and on their last mission, in that cursed village outside Kabul, Shadow sacrificed himself to save Axel's life. Axel remembered that day in every single detail. The morning sun was scorching. The heat was unbearable, rising in waves from the desert floor. His team was on routine patrol, following an intelligence report about suspected insurgent activity in a small village 12 kilometers outside the city. Axel and Shadow were on point, like they always were. Shadow had been with him since basic canine training 5 years earlier. They'd bonded instantly, something the trainer said was rare. Most handlers took weeks, even months, to sync with their dogs. But Axel and Shadow? It took 3 days. Shadow was a 2-year-old German Shepherd when they met. Strong, intelligent, focused. He had the instincts of a born warrior and the heart of a protector. Their first deployment together was in Iraq. Shadow saved 4 lives in the first month alone, sniffing out IEDs that would have torn through convoys, alerting the team to ambushes before they could be sprung. The second deployment was Afghanistan, Helmand Province, the most dangerous region in the country. Shadow didn't just work. He lived with Axel, slept in his tent, ate beside him, followed him everywhere. Other soldiers joked that Axel and Shadow were the same person in 2 bodies, and they weren't wrong. Axel trusted Shadow more than he trusted most people, because Shadow didn't lie, didn't have hidden agendas, didn't judge. He just stayed. On their 3rd deployment, things got darker. The enemy was smarter. The threats were harder to detect. IEDs were buried deeper, disguised better. Patrols became more dangerous. Losses mounted. Axel saw friends die, good men, fathers, brothers, sons. Every time Shadow was there, sensing Axel's pain, resting his head on Axel's lap during the sleepless nights, offering the only comfort that felt real. "You're all I got, boy," Axel would whisper. "Just you and me." Shadow would look up at him with those amber eyes, steady and unwavering, as if to say, "That's all you'll ever need." But on a Thursday morning in September, everything changed. The mission was supposed to be simple, routine. Check a village for weapon caches, gather intelligence, return to base. Axel's unit moved through the narrow dirt roads, weapons ready, nerves taut. The village was quiet. Too quiet. "Stay sharp," the squad leader muttered over the radio. "Something's off." Axel felt it too. The air was wrong. The way the locals avoided eye contact, the absence of children playing in the streets. Shadow felt it before anyone else. He stopped dead in his tracks. Axel immediately froze. He knew that posture, ears forward, body tense, nose twitching. "Shadow's got something," Axel called out. The unit halted. Everyone took cover positions. "What is it, boy?" Axel crouched down, following Shadow's line of sight. Shadow moved forward slowly, cautiously, toward a patch of disturbed dirt at the edge of the road. The soil was lighter than the surrounding earth, a telltale sign. Axel's stomach dropped. IED, 50 meters front. The team backed up carefully, creating distance. Protocol was clear. Mark it, call EOD, move around it. But Shadow didn't move. He stayed locked on something else. His ears swiveled, his nose lifted, sniffing rapidly, and then Axel heard it, a faint mechanical click. Second device, move, move! But there was no time. The explosion erupted 20 meters to their left, not from the IED they'd spotted, but from a secondary device buried in the compound wall. The blast was deafening. A shockwave of heat, dust, and shrapnel tore through the air. Axel felt himself flying backward. He hit the ground hard, the wind knocked out of him. His ears rang, his vision blurred, dust choked his lungs. For a moment he couldn't move, couldn't think. Then instinct kicked in. Shadow! Shadow! He staggered to his feet, coughing, disoriented. Through the swirling dust and smoke he searched desperately. And then he saw him. Shadow was lying 10 feet away on his side, motionless. No, 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 no. Axel ran to him, dropping to his knees. His hands shook as he reached for Shadow's neck, searching for a pulse. Faint, barely there. Medic! I need a medic! Blood soaked Shadow's fur. His breathing was shallow, labored. His eyes were half open but unfocused. Stay with me, boy. Stay with me. You hear me? Stay. The medic arrived, took one look, and Axel saw the truth in his face. Sergeant, fix him. There's nothing I said fix him! But even as Axel shouted, he knew. Deep down, he knew. Shadow's breathing slowed. His body relaxed. His eyes found Axel one last time. Those amber eyes, tired but still filled with something Axel couldn't name. Trust, maybe, or peace. Don't go, Axel whispered, his voice breaking. Please, don't leave me. Shadow's tail gave one weak wag, and then he was still. No, come on, come on. Axel pressed his hands to Shadow's chest, trying to will life back into him. But it was over. Shadow was gone. The medic placed a hand on Axel's shoulder. I'm sorry. Axel didn't hear him, didn't hear the squad calling his name, didn't hear the orders to move out. He just sat there, in the dust and blood, holding the only thing in the world that had ever made sense. They wrapped Shadow's body in a tarp, loaded him onto the transport, flew him back to base. Axel rode in silence, staring at the black bag that held his partner. At the base, they held a small ceremony, a flag, a few words, a folded collar. He died a hero, someone said. Axel said nothing, because Shadow didn't die a hero. He died saving Axel, and Axel didn't know how to live with that. He finished his deployment on autopilot, 37 days. Each one felt like a year. When he finally got home, everyone thanked him for his service, shook his hand, told him they were proud. But all Axel felt was empty. He tried therapy, tried medication, tried to move forward. Nothing worked. Because everywhere he looked, he saw Shadow, heard Shadow, felt Shadow's absence like a wound that wouldn't close. His family tried to help. His mother cooked his favorite meals. His father offered to take him fishing. His sister invited him to stay as long as he needed. But Axel couldn't stay, couldn't pretend to be okay. So 9 months after Shadow died, he bought a one-way ticket to Montana. He found a cabin for sale in the mountains, 40 miles from the nearest town. No neighbors, no noise, just silence. And for 3 years, that's where he stayed, hunting, chopping wood, surviving, but not living, because part of him had died in Kabul, and he didn't know how to get it back, until tonight. The first winter in Montana nearly broke him. The isolation wasn't the problem. Axel wanted isolation, craved it even. What nearly destroyed him was the silence. In the military, there was always noise, helicopters, gunfire, radio chatter, orders shouting, boots marching, and underneath it all, the sound of Shadow, his paws on the dirt, his panting breath, his occasional bark. But in the cabin, there was nothing. Just wind, and snow, and the echo of his own thoughts. The nightmares came every night. He'd dream he was back in Kabul, the explosion replaying over and over. Sometimes he saved Shadow. Sometimes Shadow disappeared into the dust and Axel couldn't find him. Sometimes Shadow turned and looked at him, accusation in his eyes. Why didn't you save me? Axel would wake up gasping, drenched in sweat, reaching for a dog that wasn't there. He tried to fill the silence. He bought a radio, listened to news, music, talk shows, anything to drown out the quiet. But it didn't help, because the silence wasn't outside. It was inside. By the second year, he'd stopped trying. He stopped shaving, stopped calling his family, stopped checking emails. He lived by routine. Wake at dawn, chop wood, hunt or fish, eat, sleep, repeat. The locals in town knew him as the hermit vet. They didn't bother him, didn't ask questions. He'd buy supplies once a month, canned goods, ammunition, batteries, and disappear back into the mountains. Some people thought he was crazy. Maybe he was. But crazy was better than feeling. On the third anniversary of Shadow's death, Axel didn't get out of bed. He just lay there, staring at the ceiling, remembering Shadow's bark, his warmth on cold nights, the way he'd nudge Axel's hand when he sensed something was wrong. "I'm sorry, boy," Axel whispered to the empty room. "I'm so sorry." He thought about ending it more than once. It would be easy, quick, painless, but something always stopped him, some stubborn, stupid part of him that refused to quit. Shadow wouldn't have quit, so Axel didn't either. He got up, made coffee, chopped wood, and kept surviving. But that night, the night the blizzard came, everything changed. The blizzard warning started 3 days before it hit. The radio crackled with emergency broadcasts. Major winter storm approaching. Expect whiteout conditions, sub-zero temperatures, and road closures. Residents are advised to stock up on supplies and avoid unnecessary travel. Axel didn't need to be told twice. He'd been through Montana winters before. He knew what a blizzard could do. He'd seen cars buried under 10 feet of snow, heard stories of hunters who wandered 50 feet from their cabins and froze to death because they couldn't find their way back. He spent 2 days preparing. Stocked up on firewood, checked the generator, filled every container he had with water in case the pipes froze, loaded up on canned food, batteries, and kerosene. By the time the storm rolled in, he was ready. Or so he thought. The first flakes started falling around 5 p.m., light, almost peaceful. By 7 p.m., the wind picked up. By 9 p.m., the world outside was a swirling white chaos. Axel sat by the fire, listening to the storm rage. The cabin groaned and creaked under the assault. Snow piled against the windows, blocking out what little light remained. He poured himself a whiskey, stared into the flames. This was his life now. Alone, waiting out storms, waiting out time. He thought about Shadow. He always thought about Shadow. Wondered where he was buried. Wondered if anyone visited the grave. Wondered if it mattered. Probably not. The dead don't care about graves. At 11 p.m., he decided to sleep. He added more wood to the fire, pulled a blanket over himself on the couch, and closed his eyes. That's when he heard it. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Faint at first, almost imperceptible under the howling wind. Axel opened his eyes, listened. Nothing. He closed them again. Scratch, scratch, scratch. There it was again, louder this time. He sat up, frowning. Probably a branch, or debris blown against the door. But then, a bark. Low, hoarse, desperate. Axel froze. No, it couldn't be. He stood slowly, heart pounding. The scratching came again, more insistent, and another bark. Axel moved toward the door, every step heavy with disbelief. His hand hovered over the handle. This is crazy. You're hearing things. But the scratching didn't stop. He yanked the door open, and his world shattered. Standing in the doorway, backlit by the dim firelight from inside the cabin, Axel couldn't breathe. The wind tore at his clothes. Snow swirled around him in blinding sheets. The cold bit into his skin like needles. But he didn't feel any of it, because there, collapsed on his doorstep, was a ghost. A German shepherd, thin, trembling, covered in ice and mud. His fur was matted with snow, his paws were bleeding, and his body shook with exhaustion. But the eyes, those amber eyes, Axel knew those eyes. Shadow? The word came out broken, barely a whisper. The dog lifted his head weakly. His tail twitched, just once, but it was enough. Axel's knees buckled. He dropped to the ground, the cold snow soaking through his pants, but he didn't care. His hands reached out, trembling, and touched the dog's head, warm, solid, real. "Oh my God! Oh my God!" His voice cracked. Tears blurred his vision. Shadow leaned into his touch, whimpering softly, and then, with the last of his strength, he licked Axel's hand. That simple gesture broke something inside Axel. He pulled Shadow into his arms, carefully, gently, and held him. The dog was so thin he could feel every rib. So cold his body shivered uncontrollably. "How?" Axel choked out. "How are you here? How are you alive?" Shadow didn't answer. Couldn't answer. But then Axel heard something else. A softer sound. Higher pitched. Whimpering. He looked past Shadow, and his heart stopped again. 2 puppies, huddled together in the snow, barely visible in the storm. One was black and tan, the other slightly lighter. Both were shaking violently, their tiny bodies no match for the deadly cold. Jesus! Axel didn't hesitate. He scooped up Shadow first, lifting him as gently as he could, and carried him inside, laid him on the rug by the fire. Then he ran back out into the blizzard. The puppies were crying now, desperate little sounds that tore at his heart. He grabbed them both, one in each arm, and bolted back inside. He kicked the door shut behind him, the wind slamming it with a thunderous bang. For a moment, he just stood there, breathing hard, staring at the 3 dogs now in his cabin. Shadow and 2 puppies. His mind couldn't process it, couldn't make sense of any of it. But there was no time to think. Shadow was dying. The puppies were freezing. Move. Now. Axel's military training kicked in. Assess, prioritize, act. He grabbed every blanket he had and spread them on the floor near the fireplace, threw more wood into the fire until the flames roared. Then he knelt beside Shadow. The dog was barely conscious. His breathing was shallow and uneven. His eyes were half closed. "Stay with me, boy," Axel whispered, his hands running over Shadow's body, checking for injuries. "You hear me? You stay with me." There were old scars, deep ones, along his ribs, his back legs, his shoulder. This dog had been through hell, but there was no fresh blood, no open wounds. He was just exhausted, starved, half frozen. Axel grabbed towels and started drying him off, rubbing warmth back into his limbs. Shadow's body twitched weakly, but he didn't resist. "You're okay. You're safe now. I got you." The puppies huddled together on the blanket, shivering but quiet now. They watched Axel with wide, terrified eyes. Once Shadow was dry, Axel turned to them. They couldn't have been more than 3 or 4 months old. Still babies. He dried them off too, speaking softly. "It's okay, little ones. You're safe. I'm not going to hurt you." One of them, the darker one, sniffed his hand cautiously. The other pressed closer to Shadow, whimpering. Shadow cracked his eyes open and looked at the puppies. Even in his weakened state, his instinct was to protect them. He shifted slightly, as if trying to position himself between them and any potential threat. "Easy, boy," Axel murmured. "They're safe, I promise." He ran to the kitchen and grabbed everything he could think of. Water, canned chicken, beef broth, an old box of dog food he'd kept for years, never had the heart to throw it away. He poured water into bowls and set them in front of the puppies. They lunged for it, lapping desperately. He heated the broth on the stove and brought it to Shadow, holding the bowl close to his mouth. "Come on, boy, drink." Shadow's nose twitched. Slowly, weakly, he lapped at the warm liquid. Axel felt a wave of relief. He's drinking. That's good. That's a good sign. The puppies finished the water and immediately looked for more. Axel refilled the bowls, then opened the can of chicken and set it out for them. They devoured it. Shadow watched them eat before he took a single bite himself. Even now, even after everything, he was still taking care of them first. Axel's throat tightened. "You're a good dad, aren't you?" he whispered. Shadow's tail twitched again, the faintest wag. Axel sat back on his heels, watching the 3 of them. His mind was racing. How is this possible? Shadow died. I saw him die. I felt his last breath. The medic confirmed it. But he's here. Unless, what if he didn't die? What if the medic was wrong? What if Shadow was in shock, his vitals so low they couldn't detect them, and he survived somehow? But then where had he been for 3 years? And whose puppies were these? Questions flooded his mind, each one more impossible than the last, but the answers didn't matter. Not right now. Right now, all that mattered was keeping them alive. Axel stayed up all night. He kept the fire going, kept checking on Shadow, kept the puppies warm and fed. Every hour he'd place his hand on Shadow's chest, feeling for the rise and fall of his breathing. Still there, still alive. The storm raged outside. The wind screamed. Snow piled higher and higher against the windows. But inside, by the fire, there was warmth. And for the first time in 3 years, Axel wasn't alone. Around 4 a.m., Shadow finally fell into a deeper sleep. His breathing evened out. His body stopped shivering. The puppies curled up against him, tiny balls of fur tucked into his side. Axel sat on the floor, his back against the couch, watching them. He was exhausted, physically, emotionally, but he couldn't sleep, because part of him was terrified that if he closed his eyes, they'd be gone when he opened them again. That this was all some cruel dream, some hallucination brought on by isolation and grief. But Shadow was real. He could see him, hear him breathing, feel the warmth radiating from the fire reflecting off his fur. "I don't understand," Axel whispered into the quiet. "I don't understand how you're here, but I'm so glad you are." Shadow's ear twitched at the sound of his voice, but he didn't wake. Axel pulled his knees to his chest and rested his forehead against them. And for the first time in 3 years, he cried, not out of grief, out of gratitude. When dawn finally broke, the storm had eased. The wind was still howling, but the snow had lightened. Pale gray light filtered through the frost-covered windows. Axel stood and looked outside. The world was buried. Snowdrifts reached halfway up the cabin walls. The road, if you could even call it that, was completely impassable. No one was getting in or out for days. Good. He didn't want anyone else here anyway. He turned back to the dogs. Shadow was awake now, watching him with those steady amber eyes. "Hey boy," Axel said softly, kneeling beside him. "How you feeling?" Shadow's tail wagged, slowly, tiredly, but it wagged. Axel's heart swelled. He reached out and gently stroked Shadow's head. The dog leaned into his touch, closing his eyes. "I missed you," Axel whispered. "God, I missed you so much." The puppies stirred, yawning and stretching. They blinked up at Axel with sleepy eyes, then immediately looked around for food. Axel couldn't help but smile. All right, breakfast coming up." He prepared more food, more water, made sure everyone had enough. Shadow ate this time, not much, but more than before. Progress. As the puppies tumbled over each other, playing despite everything they'd been through, Axel sat beside Shadow and ran his hand along the dog's scarred fur. "Where have you been, boy?" he asked quietly. "What happened to you?" Shadow looked at him, and in those eyes, Axel saw pain, survival, determination. This dog had been through hell, but he'd made it back. Somehow, against all odds, he'd found his way home. Tears stung Axel's eyes again. "I'm sorry I didn't look for you," he said, his voice thick. "I thought you were gone. I thought I'd lost you forever." Shadow rested his head on Axel's lap, and in that moment, Axel understood. Shadow hadn't come back because he was lost. He'd come back because Axel needed him. The storm continued through the day. Axel spent every moment caring for the dogs, feeding them, warming them, making sure they were comfortable. He checked Shadow over more thoroughly. The scars were old, months, maybe years old, healed but permanent reminders of whatever he'd endured. His right hind leg was weak. He limped when he tried to stand. But he was alive. That was all that mattered. The puppies, meanwhile, were surprisingly resilient. Once they warmed up and had full bellies, they became playful, curious. They explored every corner of the cabin, sniffing everything, chewing on anything they could find. Axel watched them with something he hadn't felt in years: joy. He even laughed when one of them, the lighter one, tried to drag a boot twice her size across the floor. "You're a feisty one, aren't you?" he said, gently taking the boot back. She barked at him. A tiny, high-pitched bark that was more adorable than intimidating. Shadow watched from his spot by the fire, his eyes following the puppy's every move. Even now, even in his condition, he was protecting them. "They're yours, aren't they?" Axel asked, sitting beside him. Shadow's gaze shifted to Axel, and somehow Axel knew the answer. Yes, these were Shadow's pups, which meant somewhere, out there had been a mother. Another dog. What happened to her? Axel didn't know. Might never know. But he made a silent promise. I'll take care of them. I'll keep them safe. For you." That night, as the fire crackled and the storm finally began to die down, Axel lay on the floor beside Shadow. The puppies were asleep, curled up in a pile of fur and warmth. Shadow rested his head on Axel's chest, and for the first time in 3 years, Axel felt something he thought he'd lost forever: peace. "Welcome home, boy," he whispered. Shadow's tail wagged once, and Axel closed his eyes, finally allowing himself to sleep. Because he wasn't alone anymore. He had his brother back. The storm lasted 3 days. 3 days of howling wind and relentless snow. 3 days of being completely cut off from the outside world. But Axel didn't mind. For the first time in years, he had a purpose, a reason to get up in the morning. Shadow and the puppies needed him, and he needed them. Every few hours he'd check on Shadow, monitor his breathing, make sure he was eating and drinking. The dog was weak, but each day he seemed a little stronger, a little more alert. The puppies, on the other hand, recovered quickly. By the second day, they were running around the cabin like they owned the place, chasing each other, playing tug-of-war with an old sock, barking at shadows. Axel found himself smiling more in those 3 days than he had in 3 years. He even started talking to them. "All right, you two need names," he said on the third morning, watching them wrestle on the floor. The darker one, a female with intelligent eyes and a fearless attitude, reminded him of fire, strong, untamed. "Ember," he decided. "Your name is Ember." She looked up at him and barked, as if approving. The lighter one, a male, slightly smaller, more cautious but equally curious, had a softer energy, like the quiet strength of ash after a fire has burned. "And you're Ash." Ash tilted his head, ears perked up. "Ash and Ember," Axel repeated, nodding. "Yeah, that works." Shadow watched from his spot by the fire, his tail wagging slowly. He approved too. On the 4th morning, the storm finally broke. The wind died down, the snow stopped falling, and through the frost-covered windows, Axel could see pale sunlight struggling through the gray clouds. He stepped outside for the first time in days. The world was transformed. Snow covered everything in a thick, pristine blanket. Drifts reached up to the cabin's roof in some places. The trees bowed under the weight of ice and snow, their branches frosted white. It was beautiful and deadly. The road was completely buried, impassable. Even with his truck, there was no way through, but the radio said the plows would come through in a day or two. The main roads would be cleared first, then the rural routes. Axel made a decision. As soon as the roads were clear, he'd take Shadow to the vet. He needed to know if the dog was really okay, if there were internal injuries, if that limp could be fixed. He went back inside and found Shadow standing for the first time since he'd arrived, wobbly, unsteady, but standing. "Hey, look at you," Axel said softly, approaching slowly. Shadow took a step, then another. His right hind leg dragged slightly, but he kept going. Ember and Ash immediately ran to him, yipping excitedly, circling his legs. Shadow's tail wagged and he lowered his head to nuzzle them. Axel's throat tightened. This dog had been through hell, had walked God knows how many miles in freezing conditions, had nearly died, and his first priority, the moment he could stand, was to check on his pups. "You're something else, you know that?" Axel said, his voice rough with emotion. Shadow looked at him, and for a moment, it was like no time had passed at all, like they were back in Afghanistan, partners, brothers. "Come on," Axel said. "Let's get you some real food." 2 days later, the plows came through. Axel heard them early in the morning, the distant rumble of heavy machinery carving through the snow. By noon, the main road was clear enough to drive on. He loaded Shadow and the puppies into his truck. Shadow rode in the passenger seat, the puppies in a box lined with blankets in the back. The drive to town took twice as long as usual. The roads were still treacherous, packed snow and ice making every turn hazardous. But Axel drove carefully, slowly. He had precious cargo. The veterinary clinic was a small building on the edge of town. A hand-painted sign out front read, "Hayes Animal Care." Dr. Sarah Hayes had been the town's only vet for over 20 years. She was in her mid-50s, with silver-streaked hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, and kind eyes that had seen just about everything. When Axel walked in carrying Shadow, with the 2 puppies following at his heels, her eyes widened. "Well," she said, setting down her clipboard, "that's not something you see every day." "I need you to check him," Axel said without preamble. All of them, please." Dr. Hayes nodded, her professional demeanor kicking in immediately. "Bring him back." She led them to an examination room. Axel lifted Shadow onto the table as gently as he could. Dr. Hayes ran a scanner over Shadow's shoulder, checking for a microchip. The scanner beeped. She frowned, reading the screen, then her frown deepened. "This dog," she said slowly. "He has a military chip." "I know. According to this, he died 3 years ago, in Afghanistan." "I know." Dr. Hayes looked up at Axel, her expression unreadable. Then she looked at Shadow, then back at Axel. "You want to tell me what's going on?" Axel took a breath and told her everything. The mission in Kabul, the explosion, Shadow's last moments, the medic's confirmation, the burial, the 3 years alone in the mountains, the blizzard night, the scratching at the door, finding Shadow alive with 2 puppies. Dr. Hayes listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Dogs are remarkable animals. Their ability to survive, to endure, to find their way home, it defies explanation sometimes." She began examining Shadow, checked his vitals, his teeth, his eyes, ran her hands over his body, feeling for injuries. "He's malnourished," she said, "severely, and dehydrated. These scars," she traced the old wounds along his ribs. "They're old, months, maybe over a year, healed on their own. He's lucky they didn't get infected." "Will he be okay?" "His leg, this limp, it's from an old injury. Looks like a fracture that healed incorrectly. It's permanent, but with physical therapy and maybe some supplements he can manage it. He won't be running marathons, but he'll walk." Axel felt a weight lift from his chest. "And the puppies?" Dr. Hayes examined Ember and Ash next. They squirmed and licked her hands, making her smile. "They're healthy, a little underweight, but nothing serious. Maybe 4 months old. They're his, aren't they?" "I think so." "The mother?" "I don't know. She wasn't with them." Dr. Hayes' expression softened with sadness. "She probably didn't make it, or she brought them as far as she could, and, well." Axel nodded, his jaw tight. Dr. Hayes finished the exams and turned to him. "I can give him fluids, some antibiotics just to be safe, vitamins for all 3 of them. But honestly, what they need most is what you're already giving them: food, warmth, safety." She paused, studying Axel. "And I think," she added gently, "they're giving you something too." Axel looked at Shadow, at Ember and Ash tumbling over each other on the floor. "Yeah," he said quietly. "They are." Dr. Hayes administered the fluids and sent him home with medications and instructions. "Bring him back in 2 weeks," she said. "We'll monitor his progress." "Thank you." "No," she said, her voice firm but kind. "Thank you. That dog walked through hell to find you. The least we can do is help him get better." Axel drove home in silence, but it wasn't the heavy, suffocating silence he'd lived in for 3 years. It was different now. Full, somehow. The weeks that followed were a blur of healing and adjustment. Shadow grew stronger every day. His appetite returned. His coat, once dull and matted, began to shine again. The limp remained, but it didn't slow him down much. Ember and Ash grew like weeds. Their legs got longer, their barks got louder, their personalities emerged more clearly. Ember was bold, fearless, always the first to explore something new, the first to bark at a strange sound. Ash was quieter, thoughtful. He'd watch before acting, always checking where Shadow was before venturing too far. And Shadow was their anchor. He watched over them constantly, corrected them when they got too rough, comforted them when they were scared, taught them, in the way only a parent can, how to be. Axel watched it all with something close to wonder. He'd forgotten what it felt like to care about something, to have something to protect, to have a reason to wake up in the morning beyond just surviving another day. Now his mornings had purpose. Feed the dogs, take them outside, play with the pups while Shadow supervised, check Shadow's leg, make sure everyone was healthy and happy. It was routine, but it was a good routine. And slowly, day by day, Axel started to feel something he thought he'd lost forever. Hope. One evening, about a month after Shadow's arrival, Axel sat on the porch steps watching the sunset. Shadow lay beside him, his head resting on Axel's knee. Ember and Ash were in the yard, chasing each other in circles, their joyful barks echoing through the trees. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink. The air was crisp, but not cold. Spring was coming. "I don't know how you did it," Axel said quietly, stroking Shadow's head. "I don't know how you survived, how you found me, why you came back." Shadow looked up at him with those steady amber eyes. "But I'm glad you did." He paused, his throat tight. I was lost, boy. For a long time. I didn't know how to keep going, didn't know if I wanted to." His voice cracked. "But you came back, you found me, and you brought them." He nodded toward the puppies. "You gave me something to live for again." Shadow's tail wagged slowly. Axel wiped at his eyes, not caring that he was crying. "I don't deserve you," he whispered. "I never did." Shadow shifted, resting his head more firmly on Axel's lap, as if to say, "Yes, you do." That night, Axel made another decision. He couldn't keep this to himself. There were others out there like him, veterans struggling, drowning in silence and grief, lost, and maybe, just maybe, he could help. He started researching, looking into therapy dog programs, K9 veteran organizations, training certifications. It took weeks of planning, months of preparation, but eventually he launched a small program, K9 Valor Companions. The goal was simple: train rescue dogs to become therapy animals for veterans dealing with PTSD, depression, and trauma. Ember and Ash were his first students, and they were naturals. Ember's boldness made her perfect for veterans who needed confidence, someone to push them out of their comfort zone. Ash's gentleness made him ideal for those who needed calm, a quiet presence that asked for nothing but gave everything. Shadow, despite his age and limp, became the program's heart. Veterans would come to the cabin, nervous, guarded, broken, and Shadow would walk up to them, rest his head on their lap, and just be there. No judgment, no expectations, just presence. And one by one, Axel watched those veterans start to heal. Just like he had. 6 months after Shadow's return, a local journalist heard about the program and asked to do a story. Axel almost said no. He didn't want attention, didn't want publicity. But then he thought about all the veterans out there who didn't know help was available, who were sitting alone in their own cabins, drowning in their own silence. So he agreed. The interview took place on the porch. Shadow lay at Axel's feet. Ember and Ash played in the yard. "So," the journalist said, "how did you come up with the idea for this program?" Axel looked at Shadow. "I didn't," he said. "He did." "Your dog?" "My partner," Axel corrected. "Shadow isn't just a dog, he's my brother. He saved my life, more than once. I heard he was declared dead in Afghanistan." "He was. But he's here." "Yeah." Axel's voice was soft. "He is. How do you explain that?" Axel was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I don't. Some things don't need an explanation. Some things you just accept. Shadow came back. That's all I need to know." The journalist nodded, scribbling notes. "And the puppies?" "They're his. Ember and Ash. They're learning to be therapy dogs, to help other veterans the way Shadow helped me. What would you say to other veterans who are struggling?" Axel looked directly at the camera. "I'd say, you're not alone. I know it feels like it. I know the silence is crushing. I know you think no one understands." His voice grew stronger. "But there are people who care. There are programs that can help. And sometimes help comes from the most unexpected places." He reached down and rested his hand on Shadow's head. "Don't give up. Because the thing you think you lost, it might just find its way back to you." Shadow's tail wagged, and Axel smiled. A real smile. The story aired 2 weeks later. Within days, Axel's phone was ringing off the hook. Veterans from across the state, across the country, reaching out, asking about the program, asking for help. Axel answered every call, and slowly, his little cabin in the Montana mountains became a beacon, a place where broken soldiers could find healing, where lost souls could find purpose, where hope could be rekindled, all because one dog refused to stay dead, all because loyalty doesn't know how to quit, A year after Shadow returned, Axel's life was unrecognizable. The cabin that had once been a tomb of silence was now filled with life, with purpose, with meaning. Ember and Ash had grown into strong, confident dogs. Ember was now leading group sessions with veterans, her fearless energy helping them break through their walls. Ash worked one-on-one with those who needed gentleness, his calm presence a balm for shattered nerves. Shadow, despite his age and limp, remained the heart of it all. He'd sit quietly during sessions, watching, waiting. And when a veteran broke down, when the tears finally came after years of holding them back, Shadow would walk over, rest his head on their lap, and stay. He didn't need to do anything else. His presence was enough. Axel watched it happen again and again, watched grown men and women, hardened by war, crumble in the safety of Shadow's unconditional acceptance, and then rebuild, piece by piece, just like he had. One afternoon in late autumn, a veteran named Marcus drove up to the cabin. He was in his early 30s, Marine Corps. 2 tours in Iraq, honorably discharged 3 years ago. He hadn't spoken to his family in months, hadn't left his apartment in weeks, hadn't smiled in so long he'd forgotten what it felt like. When he stepped out of his truck, his hands were shaking. Axel recognized that look. He'd worn it himself not long ago. "Marcus?" Axel extended his hand. Marcus nodded, gripping it briefly. His eyes darted around nervously. "Thanks for letting me come out here." "Of course. Come on in." They walked into the cabin. Shadow was lying by the fire, as he always was. Ember and Ash were playing in the corner. Marcus stopped when he saw Shadow. "That's him?" he asked quietly. "The one from the story?" "That's him." Marcus stared at Shadow for a long moment. Then, without a word, he walked over and knelt down. Shadow lifted his head, studying the stranger, and then, slowly, he stood, limped over to Marcus, and rested his head on the man's shoulder. Marcus froze, then his shoulders started shaking, and he broke. 3 years of pain, of rage, of guilt, of feeling like he didn't belong anywhere, didn't matter to anyone, couldn't be saved. It all came out. Axel didn't interrupt, didn't try to fix it, he just let Marcus cry, because sometimes that's all someone needs. To be seen, to be heard, to be allowed to break without judgment. After a long time, Marcus pulled back, wiping his eyes. "Sorry," he muttered. "Don't be," Axel said firmly. "Not here, not ever." Marcus looked at Shadow, who was still standing beside him, tail wagging slowly. "How did he know?" Marcus asked, his voice raw. "He always knows," Axel said. They spent the next 3 hours talking about war, about loss, about the suffocating silence that comes after, and about the small, unexpected things that bring us back. A dog's loyalty, a puppy's playfulness, a sunrise after a long, dark night. When Marcus finally left, he looked different, not healed, not fixed, but lighter, like he'd set down a weight he'd been carrying too long. Before he got in his truck, he turned to Axel. "Thank you," he said. "For this. For him." Axel shook his head. "Don't thank me. Thank Shadow. He's the one who came back." Marcus nodded. Then he looked at Shadow one more time. "You're a good boy," he said softly. Shadow's tail wagged, and Marcus smiled. It was a small smile. Fragile, but real. Axel watched him drive away, and for the first time, he understood something. Shadow hadn't just come back for him. Shadow had come back for all of them. Every veteran who walked through that door, every broken soul who needed a reminder that loyalty exists, that love endures, that hope survives. Shadow was a living testament to all of it. That night, Axel sat on the porch with a cup of coffee, watching the stars. Shadow lay beside him, as he always did. Ember and Ash were curled up together on the porch, asleep. The forest was quiet. Peaceful. Axel thought about the man he used to be, the one who'd given up, who'd hidden in the mountains because he couldn't face the world, who'd counted the days not by what he accomplished but by what he survived. That man was gone, not erased, not forgotten, but transformed. "You know what's crazy?" Axel said, scratching behind Shadow's ears. 3 years ago, I thought my life was over. I thought I'd lost everything that mattered. Shadow looked up at him. But you came back. And you didn't just save my life, boy. You gave me a reason to live it. His voice thickened with emotion. You showed me that some things don't end, some bonds don't break, and some love is stronger than death. Shadow rested his head on Axel's lap, and Axel smiled through his tears. Thank you, he whispered, for not giving up on me. Winter came again. The first snow fell softly, blanketing the mountains in white. Axel stood outside, watching Ember and Ash play in the snow, now fully grown, strong and beautiful. Shadow stood beside him, his breath misting in the cold air. He was older now, slower, the limp more pronounced, but his eyes were still sharp, still watchful, still filled with that unwavering loyalty. You getting tired, old man? Axel asked gently. Shadow huffed as if offended by the suggestion. Axel laughed. Inside, the cabin was warm. The fire crackled. The smell of coffee filled the air. Axel had a session scheduled later, another veteran coming to meet the dogs, but for now, it was just them. His family. Not the one he was born into, but the one he'd found, the one that had found him. He thought about the journalist's question from months ago. What would you say to veterans who are struggling? He'd answered then. But now, with a year of perspective, he had more to say. He pulled out his phone and opened the camera, recorded a short video. If you're watching this, he began, his voice steady, and you're struggling, if you feel alone, if you think no one understands, if you've lost something, or someone, and you don't know how to keep going. He paused. I want you to know something. You're stronger than you think. The fact that you're still here, still fighting, still breathing, that's proof. Shadow walked into frame, sitting beside Axel. This is Shadow. 3 years ago, I thought I lost him forever. I thought that bond was broken. That chapter was closed. He looked at Shadow. But he came back. Through a blizzard, through impossible odds, he came back. Axel's voice grew stronger. And if he can do that, if a dog can walk through hell to find his way home, then so can you. He leaned forward, speaking directly to the camera. Don't give up. Don't stop fighting. Because somewhere out there, someone needs you. Something is waiting for you. A second chance you can't even imagine yet. He smiled. It might not come the way you expect. It might not come when you want it, but it will come. He rested his hand on Shadow's head. Loyalty doesn't die, love doesn't end, and hope always finds a way. He ended the recording, posted it to the program's page with a simple caption. For everyone who thinks they're too broken to be saved, you're not. Axel and Shadow. The video went viral. Within days, it had been shared thousands of times. Comments poured in from veterans around the world. I needed this. Thank you. I'm not giving up. This saved my life today. Axel read every single one, and every single one reminded him why Shadow had come back, not just for him, for all of them. 2 years after Shadow's return, on a quiet spring morning, Axel woke to find Shadow hadn't gotten up yet. He was still lying by the fire, breathing slowly. Axel's heart clenched. He knelt beside him. Hey boy, you okay? Shadow opened his eyes, looked at Axel, and his